The dust storm hit Redemption Creek like a fist from God himself, turning the afternoon sky the color of dried blood. Luke Delaney rode through it anyway, his jaw set against the stinging sand, his last silver dollar burning a hole in his vest pocket. The mare beneath him wheezed with each step, as worn down as her rider. They'd covered 300 miles since Tucson, running from debts and bad decisions that seemed to multiply like tumbleweeds in his wake. Through the swirling red haze, the town materialized like a mirage. Wooden storefronts leaning against each other for support, painted signs creaking in the wind, the Silver Dollar Saloon, Garrett's General Store, a church with a crooked cross, and there, squeezed between the undertaker and the barber's shop, a modest sign that read, Hearts Tailoring and Mending. Luke tied his mare to the hitching post outside the saloon, patting her neck in silent apology. Inside, the air hung thick with tobacco smoke and the sour smell of spilled whiskey. Men hunched over cards and dice, their faces weathered as old leather, eyes sharp as broken glass. Luke had seen 1,000 such places, could read the room like scripture, the house dealer with quick fingers, the drunk cowboy ready to lose his month's wages, the working girls with painted smiles and tired eyes. "Whiskey," he told the bartender, sliding his last dollar across the scarred wood. The man, thick-armed with a waxed mustache, poured without comment. "New in town? Just passing through. Ain't we all?" The bartender's laugh was dry as August, though some of us been passing through for near 20 years now. Luke nursed his drink, feeling the familiar itch in his fingers. One good hand of cards, that's all he needed. Just one lucky break to get him back on his feet. But his luck had run colder than a mountain stream lately, leaving him with nothing but the clothes on his back and a mare too loyal to sell. "You here for the game?" a voice like gravel asked from behind. Luke turned to find a man in a dove-gray suit, immaculate despite the dust storm outside. His face was smooth, unlined, but his eyes held the calculating coldness of a rattlesnake. "What game?" The man smiled, gold tooth glinting. "Why, the honor game. Friend, biggest pot Redemption Creek's seen in years. But the prize," he leaned closer, breath sweet with gin. "The prize ain't just money." Despite himself, Luke was curious. "What then?" "A kiss from the widow heart." The saloon seemed to pause, as if the name itself commanded silence. Luke noticed how conversations quieted, how eyes darted toward the door. Widow Hart. Evelyn Hart, the bartender supplied, polishing a glass with unnecessary vigor. Been in mourning near 2 years now. Keeps to herself, runs the tailor shop, prettiest woman in 3 territories, and colder than January in the Rockies. The man in gray, who introduced himself as Samuel Price, owner of the largest gambling establishment in town, explained the peculiar wager. Her late husband, God rest his soul, left considerable debts. I've been patient, more than patient, but business is business. The widow agreed to this. Arrangement. Winner of tonight's game gets to claim a kiss from her lips. Consider it a debt of honor. Luke felt something twist in his gut. He'd seen plenty of degradation in his time, women forced to extremes by circumstance, but something about this struck him as particularly cruel. "That's barbaric." Price shrugged. "That's business. You in or not? Buy-in's $50. Luke touched his empty pocket and turned back to his whiskey. But as the afternoon wore on and the saloon filled with men eager for the evening spectacle, he found himself drawn to the window. Through the settling dust, he could see the tailor shop, its windows dark behind clean curtains. Then he saw her. She emerged from the shop like a shadow, dressed in black from collar to hem, a basket over one arm. Even from across the street, Luke could see the straight line of her spine, the careful way she moved, as if the very air might shatter her. Her face was obscured by a black bonnet, but something about her, the dignified loneliness, perhaps, made his chest tighten. A group of cowboys lounging outside the Mercantile called out to her, crude suggestions that made Luke's jaw clench. She never acknowledged them, never quickened her pace, just continued down the boardwalk with that same deliberate grace. "Beautiful, ain't she?" Price had appeared at his elbow again. like a painting in a museum, too perfect to touch. That's what makes tonight so interesting. Luke watched until she disappeared into the general store. Count me out. But fate, as Luke had learned, had a perverse sense of humor. As evening fell and the saloon filled to capacity, a commotion outside drew everyone's attention. A fight had broken out between two miners, and in the chaos, someone's pistol discharged. The bullet went wild, shattering the window of the silver dollar. In the confusion that followed, men diving for cover, women screaming, the sheriff trying to restore order, Luke found himself pressed against the bar next to an elderly man in preacher's clothes who was clutching a leather satchel to his chest like a newborn. "Son," the old man wheezed, eyes wild with fear. "I can't. My heart." He pressed the satchel into Luke's hands. "The buy-in. I was going to play for her freedom, give her the kiss myself and end this mockery. But I can't. Please." Before Luke could respond, the old man collapsed. In the chaos, with the doctor being summoned and the crowd pressing in, Luke found himself holding $50 in worn bills and a decision that would change everything. An hour later, he sat at the poker table in Price's establishment. The money that wasn't his stacked before him. The room was packed, men standing 3 deep around the table. Smoke hung like morning fog, and the smell of unwashed bodies and anticipation was thick enough to cut. And there, in a chair by the wall, sat Evelyn Hart. Luke's first clear look at her stole his breath. She was younger than he'd expected, perhaps 25, with dark hair pulled back severely from a face that belonged in a Renaissance painting. Beautiful, yes, but it was the stillness that struck him. She sat like a statue, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on some point beyond the room. Only the slight tremor in her fingers betrayed any emotion. "Gentlemen," Price announced, "the rules are simple. Winner takes the pot and a kiss from the lovely widow Hart." The game began. Luke played mechanically at first, his mind on the woman sitting silent as a ghost. But as the hands progressed and players folded one by one, his old instincts kicked in. He read the tells, the merchant who tugged his ear when bluffing, the rancher who held his breath on a good hand, Price himself who smiled a fraction wider when the cards favored him. The pot grew. $100, $200, $3. Players dropped out, cursing their luck. Soon it was down to 3, Luke, Price, and a young cavalry officer with nervous eyes. "I'll raise 50, Price said smoothly, adding bills to the pile. The officer folded with a muttered oath. Luke looked at his cards. A pair of queens. Nothing special. Then he looked at Price, at the slight sheen of sweat on the man's upper lip despite the cool evening. He glanced at Evelyn Hart, found her watching him for the first time, her dark eyes unreadable. "I'll call," Luke said quietly, "and raise everything I have." Price's smile faltered. That's near $100. "Then I guess you'll have to decide if your hand's worth it." The room held its breath. Price studied his cards, studied Luke, then slowly pushed his remaining money forward. "Call." Luke laid down his queens. Price stared, then erupted. "2 queens. You bet everything on 2 queens?" "Sometimes," Luke said, gathering the pot with steady hands. "It's not about the cards you hold. It's about the ones you make others think you have." The room exploded in noise, cheers, curses, demands for another round. But Luke was already standing, moving toward the widow. Up close, he could see the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands clenched in her lap. "Ma'am," he said quietly, aware of every eye in the room upon them. She stood slowly, resignation in every line of her body. Around them, men pressed closer, eager for the spectacle. Luke leaned in, close enough to smell lavender soap and something else, fear, sharp as copper, instead of claiming her lips. He whispered in her ear, "I only want to see your eyes without fear in them." Then, louder, for the crowd, "A gentleman doesn't take what isn't freely given. The debt is paid. Mrs. Hart, you're free to go." The silence was deafening. Then Price's voice, ugly with rage. "You can't do that! The rules! The rules said a kiss," Luke replied calmly. "Nobody specified where or how. I've claimed mine." He stepped back, offering Evelyn his arm. She took it after a moment's hesitation, and he escorted her through the crowd of stunned faces, out into the clean night air. On the boardwalk, she finally spoke, her voice low and rusty with disuse. "Why?" Luke touched his hat brim. "Because I've been down on my luck too. Ma'am, doesn't mean a person loses their dignity." She studied him for a long moment, something shifting in those dark eyes. Then, without a word, she turned and walked away, back straight, step measured. Luke watched until the darkness swallowed her, then turned back to face the angry crowd spilling from the saloon. He had a feeling his luck in Redemption Creek was about to get a lot more complicated. The morning after the poker game, Luke woke to find Redemption Creek buzzing like a disturbed hive. He'd taken a room at McAllister's boarding house, a modest establishment run by a widow who asked no questions as long as the rent was paid. Through his window, he could see folks gathering in small groups, their gestures animated, clearly discussing the previous night's events. Luke dressed carefully, aware that he'd made enemies. Price wouldn't take kindly to being outmaneuvered, and the men who'd wanted their spectacle would nurse their disappointment like a grudge. He strapped on his Colt, a habit from his cavalry days, and headed downstairs. "Morning, Mr. Delaney, Mrs." McAllister greeted him, setting down a plate of biscuits and gravy. "Quite the stir you caused last night. Word travels fast. Faster than wildfire in August." She poured coffee, black as tar. "That was a decent thing you did for the widow, Hart. Not many would have passed up such an opportunity." Luke concentrated on his breakfast. But Mrs. McAllister wasn't finished. Poor souls had enough grief. Losing her husband like that, violent-like, then having to fend for herself in a town full of wolves. "How did he die?" The landlady glanced around, lowering her voice. "Shot dead in their own home? Self-defense, they said. Thomas Hart was a drinker. Had a mean streak when the whiskey got hold of him. Sheriff found her covered in bruises. Thomas with a bullet in his chest. Clear enough what happened, but still." She shook her head. Some things mark a woman forever. After breakfast, Luke wandered the town, getting the lay of the land. Redemption Creek was typical of the mining settlements scattered across the territory, built fast and cheap, sustained by silver deposits in the nearby hills. The decent folks tried to maintain civilization with their church socials and civic committees, while the rougher elements ruled the nights with whiskey and cards. He found himself outside Hart's Tailoring, studying the neat window display. Through the glass, he could see Evelyn working, her head bent over dark fabric, fingers moving with practiced precision. A bell chimed as he entered. She looked up, needle poised mid-stitch. For a moment, neither spoke. "Mr. Delaney." Her voice was carefully neutral. "Mrs. Hart, He removed his hat, suddenly aware of how worn his clothes were. "I've got a shirt needs mending. If you're taking work." She studied him, those dark eyes revealing nothing. Then she nodded toward a chair. "Let me see it." Luke shrugged off his coat, unbuttoned his shirt to reveal the torn garment beneath. He'd ripped it escaping through a window in Tucson, a detail he didn't share. Evelyn took the shirt, examining the damage with professional interest. 3-inch tear, clean edges. I can fix this. 25 cents. That's fair. She moved to her work table, selecting thread. Luke watched her work. The shop silent except for the whisper of a needle through fabric. The space was orderly, bolts of cloth arranged by color, patterns pinned to one wall. It smelled of starch and lavender, a world removed from the saloons and stables he frequented. "Why did you really do it?" she asked suddenly, not looking up from her work. "Do what?" "Last night, you could have claimed your prize. No one would have thought less of you for it." Luke considered his words carefully. "My mother raised me to believe a man's character shows in how he treats those who can't fight back." Her hand stilled. "I can fight back. I don't doubt it, ma'am. She resumed sewing, but something in her posture had eased slightly. "You're not from around here?" "No, ma'am. Originally from Missouri. Been drifting since the war." "Cavalry?" "3rd Regiment. You?" "Virginia, originally. My father was a minister." A bitter smile touched her lips. "He'd be appalled to see where I ended up. We all end up places we never expected." She tied off the thread, held up the mended shirt. The repair was nearly invisible. "There, good as new." Luke paid her, their fingers brushing as she handed back his change. She pulled away as if burned. "Mrs. Hart, thank you for your business. Mr. Delaney." Her tone had returned to its former coolness. "Good day." Over the following weeks, Luke settled into an uneasy routine. He found work at the livery stable, honest labor that kept him fed if not prosperous. The town slowly accepted his presence, though Price's men watched him with unfriendly eyes. He avoided the gambling tables, a feat of willpower that surprised him, and he kept returning to the tailor's shop, always with legitimate business, a torn pocket, loose buttons, frayed cuffs. Evelyn never turned him away, though their conversations remained carefully superficial. Weather, town gossip, the rising price of silver. But sometimes, when she thought he wasn't looking, he caught her watching him with an expression he couldn't decipher. Curiosity? Wariness? Something else? One afternoon, a violent thunderstorm swept in from the mountains, turning the streets to mud rivers. Luke arrived at the shop soaked through, water streaming from his hat. "Good Lord," Evelyn exclaimed, the most emotion he'd heard from her. "You'll catch your death. Come in, come in." She bustled about, stoking the small stove, hanging his coat to dry. "What possessed you to come out in this weather?" Luke held up a bundle. "Promised Mrs. McAllister I'd deliver this fabric." "Didn't realize the storm would hit so fast." "Men," she muttered, but there was almost fondness in it. "Sit by the fire. I'll make tea." They sat in companionable silence as rain lashed the windows. The shop felt like a haven, warm and dry, separated from the harsh world outside. Evelyn had let her guard down slightly, her usual rigid posture relaxed. "This reminds me of Virginia," she said softly. "Summer storms that would roll in from nowhere, wash everything clean. You miss it? I miss—" She paused, considering. "I miss who I was there, before your marriage?" Her cup rattled against the saucer. "Before everything." Luke sensed dangerous ground, but pressed forward anyway. "Your husband is dead." The words were flat, final, and better for it. The vehemence surprised them both. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth, eyes wide. "I shouldn't have—" "Forgive me." "Nothing to forgive. Man who raises his hand to a woman deserves what he gets." She stared at him, something raw and desperate in her expression. Then, as if making a decision, she set down her tea and rolled up her sleeve. Luke's breath caught. Scars, old but visible, marked her forearm, burn marks. From the look of them, his favorite punishment. She said quietly, "When I burned dinner, or spoke out of turn, or looked at him wrong." She rolled the sleeve back down. "So, yes, Mr. Delaney, he's dead, and I'm not sorry. Does that shock you?" "No, ma'am, makes me sorry I didn't know him. I'd have killed him myself." The words hung between them, charged with meaning. Outside, thunder crashed, rattling the windows. Evelyn stood abruptly, moving to the window. "You should know the whole truth," she said, back to him. "Since you've been so kind." It was self-defense, yes, but not just mine. She took a shaky breath. "There was a girl, 15 years old, daughter of the Mexican family that worked our ranch. Thomas had been bothering her. That night, I heard her screaming." Luke remained silent, letting her speak. "I found them in the barn. He had her pinned, was trying to—" She wrapped her arms around herself. "I grabbed his gun, told him to stop. He laughed, said he owned everything on his property, including her. When he turned back to the girl, I shot him. You did right." She whirled to face him. Did I? The girl ran that night, terrified she'd be blamed. I never saw her again. The sheriff believed my story about self-defense, but only because of Thomas's reputation. Half the town thinks I'm a murderer. The other half thinks I'm a fool who couldn't handle her man properly. And what do you think? I think... Her voice broke. I think I'm tired of being afraid. Tired of jumping at shadows. Tired of seeing his face every time I close my eyes. The storm had passed, leaving dripping eaves and golden afternoon light. Luke stood, moved toward her slowly, giving her time to retreat. She didn't... You're the strongest woman I've ever met, he said simply. She laughed, but it was edged with tears. Strong? I hide in this shop. I wear mourning clothes for a man I hated. I let Price humiliate me to pay debts that shouldn't be mine. How is that strong? You survived. You saved that girl. You get up every morning and face a town that judges you. That's strength. She searched his face, looking for deception or pity. Finding neither, she swayed toward him slightly. For a moment, Luke thought she might let him embrace her. Then footsteps on the boardwalk broke the spell. Your coat's dry, she said briskly, moving away. Storm's passed. Luke collected his things, understanding the dismissal. At the door, he paused. For what it's worth, Mrs. Hart, I don't see his face when I look at you. I see yours. And it's beautiful. He left before she could respond. But through the window, he glimpsed her touching her cheek where tears had traced paths like rain. That night, alone in his boarding house room, Luke stared at the ceiling and admitted what he'd been avoiding. He was falling for Evelyn Hart, a woman with ghosts in her eyes and secrets in her past, a woman who might never trust another man. He'd gambled on worse odds, but never with stakes this high. The whispers started like a brush fire, spreading from the general store to the saloon, from the church steps to the livery stable. Luke Delaney and the widow Hart, seen talking outside her shop, him visiting regular-like, her almost smiling. Imagine that, Evelyn Hart nearly smiling at a man. Reverend Josiah Garvey was the first to make his displeasure known, a man in his 50s with iron-gray hair and the bearing of an Old Testament prophet. He cornered Luke outside the barber shop one morning. Mr. Delaney. The Reverend's voice carried the weight of judgment. A word, if you please. Luke paused, recognizing trouble. Reverend, I'll speak plainly. Your attentions to Mrs. Hart are becoming noticed. The woman has suffered enough scandal. She doesn't need a gambling man adding to her troubles. With respect, Reverend, I'm not gambling anymore. And my business with Mrs. Hart is just that. Business. Garvey's eyes narrowed. See that it remains so. That woman needs protection, not further corruption. Some of us have been looking after her interests since her husband's unfortunate demise. Something in the Reverend's tone made Luke's hackles rise. Looking after her how? Spiritual guidance, ensuring her reputation remains as intact as possible given the circumstances. I've even spoken to Sheriff Watson about keeping the more unsavory elements away from her. Garvey adjusted his collar. She's fragile. Mr. Delaney. Best you remember that. But it was Walter Briggs, the blacksmith, whose interest proved more troubling. A bear of a man with arms like tree trunks and a ruddy face. Briggs had been sweet on Evelyn even before her husband's death. Luke learned this from Mrs. McAllister, who seemed to know everyone's business. Walter's been waiting what he considers a decent interval, the landlady confided. Plans to court her proper-like once she's out of mourning. Won't take kindly to competition. Luke discovered the truth of this when Briggs confronted him at the livery stable. You're that gambling man, Briggs said, blocking the doorway. The one who's been sniffing around the widow Hart? I'm the man who shoes horses for a living, Luke replied evenly. Same as you. Not the same at all. Briggs stepped closer, using his considerable size to intimidate. I've known Evelyn since she came to town, stood by her through her troubles. What have you done except embarrass her with that circus at Price's place? I'd say I kept her from being embarrassed worse. Briggs's face darkened. You think you're clever, but men like you, drifters, gamblers, you take what you want and move on. Evelyn needs stability, a proper home, children, things I can give her. Maybe you should let the lady decide what she needs. The blacksmith's ham-sized fist clenched. Maybe I should remind you how things work in Redemption Creek. Maybe you should try. They stood frozen, violence crackling between them like heat lightning. Finally, Briggs stepped back, but his expression promised this wasn't over. Stay away from her, Delaney, for your own good. The pressure might have worked on a different man, but Luke had faced down Confederate cavalry charges. A lovesick blacksmith didn't much scare him. Still, he noticed the way conversations stopped when he entered places, the calculating looks that followed him. Then the stranger arrived. Luke first saw him outside the Silver Dollar, a lean man with the pale eyes of a snake and clothes that marked him as prosperous. Texas, from the look of his silver-studded saddle. The stranger was asking questions, showing a tintype photograph to anyone who'd look. I'm searching for my cousin, Luke overheard him telling the bartender. Poor dear Evelyn. Heard she was widowed. Came to offer my condolences and assistance. Something about the man raised Luke's instincts. That evening, he mentioned the stranger to Evelyn when delivering a jacket for mending. Her reaction was immediate and alarming. The color drained from her face, and the jacket slipped from nerveless fingers. What did he look like? Luke described the man, watched her sink into a chair. Mrs. Hart. His name is Royce Geller, she whispered. He was Thomas's cousin, from Austin. Her hands trembled as she picked up the jacket. He can't be here for condolences. The Geller family cut Thomas off years ago. Then why? The land. Her voice was hollow. Thomas owned 300 acres outside town, good grazing land with water rights. It should have gone to his family, but Thomas changed his will after we married. Left everything to me. She looked up, eyes desperate. Royce swore he'd contest it. Said that I manipulated Thomas, or worse. That night, Luke's sleep was broken by nightmares that weren't his own but Evelyn's. Somehow, he saw her younger, terrified, a man's hands at her throat, saw the gun heavy in her grip, the shot that freed her and damned her all at once, saw vultures circling, waiting to pick her clean. He woke determined. Whatever game this Royce Geller was playing, Luke wouldn't let Evelyn face it alone. The next afternoon brought his resolution to the test. Returning from the stable, he found a small crowd gathered outside the tailor shop. Raised voices carried on the wind. Evelyn's, high and strained, and a man's smooth drawl. Luke pushed through the onlookers to find Royce Geller lounging against Evelyn's doorframe, blocking her exit, simply suggesting we discuss this like family. Geller was saying, no need for unpleasantness. We are not family. Evelyn stood rigid, chin raised despite the fear Luke could read in every line of her body. Please leave. Now. Now. That's no way to treat your dear departed husband's cousin, especially when I've come so far to ensure you're properly cared for. His tone made the words sound indecent. Luke stepped forward. I believe the lady asked you to leave. Geller turned, those pale eyes assessing. And you are? Someone who doesn't like seeing women harassed on the street. Harassed? Geller smiled, cold as winter dawn. I'm discussing family business with my cousin's widow, though I hear you've been conducting some business of your own with dear Evelyn. The implication was clear. Luke felt Evelyn stiffen beside him. Whatever business Mrs. Hart and I have is honest work, more than I can say for whatever brought you here. Oh, I'm here for honest purposes. Mr. Delaney. Mr. Delaney. Yes, I've heard about you. The gambling man turned stable hand. How noble. Geller straightened his string tie. I'm here to ensure justice is done. You see, I have questions about my cousin's death. Questions that were never properly answered. The crowd murmured. Evelyn swayed slightly, and Luke steadied her with a hand at her elbow. The sheriff investigated, Luke said. Case was closed. Small-town sheriffs can be persuaded to see things certain ways, especially when the accused is a beautiful woman with a sad story. Geller's smile widened. But I'm not so easily swayed. Thomas wrote me letters, about his difficulties, his troublesome wife, her refusal to perform her wifely duties, her violent temper. That's enough. Luke's voice carried the snap of command from his cavalry days. Is it? I wonder what a proper investigation might reveal. Blood evidence. Powder burns at the wrong angle. Perhaps testimony from someone who heard Thomas's side of things. Geller touched his hat brim to Evelyn. We'll speak again soon. Cousin, when you don't have your protector present. He sauntered away, leaving shocked silence in his wake. The crowd dispersed slowly, whispers following like carrion birds. Inside the shop, Evelyn collapsed into a chair, shaking. Luke knelt beside her, chafing her cold hands. He can't prove anything, Luke said firmly. You shot Thomas in self-defense. The evidence supported it. Evidence can be twisted. Her voice was barely a whisper. Stories can be told, and who would believe me over him? I'm already the woman who killed her husband. Half the town thinks I'm a black widow. I believe you. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and something shifted in her dark eyes. Why? Why do you care what happens to me? Luke found himself caught by that gaze, drowning in it. You know why. The air between them crackled. Evelyn raised a trembling hand to his face, fingertips barely grazing his jaw. I'm poison. Luke, everything I touch turns to ash. You should run, far and fast. I'm done running. She leaned forward, and for a heartbeat Luke thought she might kiss him. Then the shop door burst open. Young Timothy Watson, the sheriff's son, stood panting in the doorway. Mrs. Hart, Pa says come quick. That Geller fellow's at the jail, filing papers. Says he's demanding a new investigation into Mr. Hart's death. Evelyn pulled away from Luke. The moment shattered. She stood, smoothing her skirts, assembling her armor of composure piece by piece. Thank you. Timothy, tell your father I'll be there directly. After the boy left, she turned to Luke. You should go. Being seen with me now will only hurt your reputation. To hell with my reputation. Luke. His name on her lips was a caress and a farewell. Some fights can't be won. I learned that long ago. But Luke saw the steel beneath her despair. The survivor who'd endured Thomas Hart's cruelties and found the strength to end them. Then it's good you won't be fighting alone this time. He left her standing in her shop, surrounded by the orderly world she'd built from chaos, and went to do what he did best, play the odds. Because if Royce Geller wanted to gamble with Evelyn's future, he'd find Luke Delaney more than ready to ante up. The game was changing, the stakes rising, and Luke had learned long ago that sometimes the only way to win was to make your opponents think they already had. The morning after Royce Geller's threats, Evelyn moved through her shop like a ghost. She'd barely slept, starting at every creak of the building, every shadow that passed her window. By noon, when Luke hadn't appeared for his usual visit, she told herself it was for the best. He needed to distance himself from her poisoned reputation. But as afternoon stretched toward evening, a different fear took hold. Luke was never late, never missed their appointed times without word. Something was wrong. She was proven right when Doc Morrison appeared at her door, his usually jovial face grave. Mrs. Hart, you'd best come to my office. It's about Mr. Delaney. Evelyn's scissors clattered to the floor. What happened? Found him behind the silver dollar this morning, beaten pretty bad. He's asking for you. She didn't remember grabbing her shawl or locking the shop. The next thing she knew, she was standing in Doc Morrison's back room, staring at Luke's battered face. One eye was swollen shut, his lips split, dark bruises mottling his ribs. Luke, she breathed, sinking into the chair beside his cot. His good eye opened, focused on her with effort. Hey there, beautiful. Who did this? Doesn't matter. He tried to sit up, winced, fell back. Doc says nothing's broken, just need to rest up. It was Geller, wasn't it? Or his men? Luke's silence was answer enough. Evelyn felt something cold and sharp crystallize in her chest. Not fear this time, but fury. "I'll kill him," she said quietly. "No." Luke caught her hand, his grip surprisingly strong despite his condition. "That's what he wants. Give him an excuse to paint you as violent, unstable. Can't protect you if you're in jail for murder. Protect me? Luke, look at yourself. This is my fault, my curse. Stop." His voice was firm despite the pain. "Man makes his own choices. I chose to stand by you. Would do it again." Doc Morrison cleared his throat. "He needs rest, Mrs. Hart. You can visit later." "I'm staying," Evelyn said flatly. The doctor looked between them, sighed, and retreated. "I'll be in the front if you need anything." Alone, Evelyn studied Luke's battered face, memorizing each cut and bruise, evidence of the price for associating with her. "You should have stayed away," she whispered. "Probably." He managed a crooked smile. "Never was good at doing what I should." She fetched water and clean cloths, gently cleaning the dried blood from his face. He bore her ministrations silently, but she felt him watching her. "Evelyn, don't talk. Rest. Need to tell you something. In case you're going to be fine. Listen." He caught her wrist. "Geller's not just here about the land. He's been asking questions around town. About that night. About the girl." Evelyn's hand stilled. "What girl?" "Don't play dumb with me. The Mexican girl. The one you saved." "How do you—" "Doesn't matter how. What matters is Geller knows too. He's trying to find her. Use her testimony somehow. Twist it maybe. Make it seem like you had other motives." Fear, cold and familiar, crept up Evelyn's spine. "She's long gone. Fled that night." "You sure about that?" She wasn't. Truth was, she'd never looked for the girl, too afraid that finding her would somehow make things worse. Her name was Rosa Mendoza. Her family worked our ranch, but they left after everything. "I'll find them," Luke said. "Make sure she's safe. Make sure Geller can't get to her." "You'll do no such thing. You can barely move. Give me a day or two." "Luke, stop." Evelyn cupped his face gently. "Stop trying to save me. I'm not worth this. You're worth everything." The simple declaration undid her. Tears she'd held back for 2 years spilled over, and she found herself sobbing against his chest, careful of his injuries. He stroked her hair, murmuring comfort. "I'm so tired," she gasped between sobs. "Tired of being afraid, tired of carrying this alone." "Then don't. Let me help carry it." She pulled back, searching his face. "Why? What could you possibly gain from this?" "Maybe I'm selfish," he said softly. "Maybe I want something for myself for once, something good and true and beautiful. I'm none of those things. You're all of them, and more." The space between them hummed with possibility. Evelyn leaned closer, drawn by something stronger than fear or propriety. Their lips were inches apart when footsteps in the hall made her jerk back. Sheriff Watson entered, his weathered face grim. "Mrs. Hart, Delaney, got some news you both need to hear." "Sheriff," Luke acknowledged warily. "Just came from a meeting with that Geller fellow and Judge Patterson. He's pushed through a formal inquiry into Thomas Hart's death. Judge agreed to a hearing next week." Evelyn's hand found Luke's, gripped tight. "Can he do that?" The case was closed. With new evidence or testimony, a case can be reopened. Geller claims he has both. Watson's expression softened slightly. "I want you to know, Mrs. Hart, I stand by my original investigation, but if Geller's got witnesses or evidence I missed—" "You didn't miss anything," Evelyn said firmly, "because there was nothing to miss. I shot Thomas to save Rosa Mendoza. That's the truth." "I believe you, but belief and legal proof are different animals." Watson turned to Luke. "As for you, son, I know what happened last night wasn't random, but unless you want to press charges—" "No charges," Luke said quickly. Watson nodded, unsurprised. "Figured as much. Watch your back, both of you. Geller's playing for keeps." After the sheriff left, silence settled heavy in the room. Finally, Evelyn stood, smoothing her skirts with trembling hands. I should go. People will talk if I stay longer. Let them talk. Luke, I mean it. I'm done caring what this town thinks. Question is, are you? She looked at him lying there, battered for defending her honor, still defiant despite everything. Something inside her, some last wall of defense, crumbled. Ask me again when you can stand without wincing, she said softly. When you're healed and thinking clearly, if you still want this, whatever this is, then we'll see. I'll hold you to that. She pressed a kiss to his forehead, gentle as a prayer, then fled before her courage failed entirely. That night, alone in her rooms above the shop, Evelyn paced like a caged animal. Part of her wanted to run, pack what little she owned, and disappear into the vast western territories. But another part, a part growing stronger by the hour, whispered of different possibilities, of standing ground, of fighting back, of Luke's eyes when he said she was worth everything. A soft knock at her back door made her freeze, heart pounding. She grabbed the derringer she kept hidden in her sewing basket. It's me, came a whispered voice. Not Luke, not Geller. A woman's voice, accented and familiar. Evelyn cracked the door to find a figure in a dark shawl, face hidden. Yes? The woman pushed back her hood, revealing features Evelyn recognized with a shock. Older now, married judging by the ring, but unmistakably Rosa Mendoza. Senora Hart, Rosa whispered. I heard about the new investigation, about the man asking questions. I came to warn you. Rosa? Evelyn pulled her inside quickly. My God, I thought you'd gone to California. We did, but my husband's work brought us back to the territory. I've been living 2 towns over, in Cedar Ridge. Rosa's dark eyes were troubled. Senora, the man who is asking about that night, he found me, offered money for me to say things, lies about you, about what happened. What did you tell him? Nothing. I ran. But he'll find others who might talk for money, others who didn't see what really happened but will claim they did. Rosa gripped Evelyn's hands. You saved my life. Now I must try to save yours. No, Rosa, you have a family now, a life. I won't have you dragged into this. I'm already in it. My conscience won't let me hide while you suffer for protecting me. Rosa's chin lifted with determination. I'll testify. Tell the truth about that night, about what Thomas tried to do. You don't understand. Your reputation is worth less than your life, and that's what this man wants to take from you. See? Your life, one way or another. The 2 women embraced, bound by shared trauma and mutual courage. When Rosa left, promising to stay close until the hearing, Evelyn felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. She thought of Luke, beaten but unbroken. Of Rosa, willing to face shame to speak truth. Of herself, no longer alone in this fight. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Geller would escalate his attacks. The town would choose sides. The hearing would force her to relive the worst night of her life in public. But tonight, for the first time since she'd pulled that trigger, Evelyn Hart didn't feel like a woman marked for destruction. She felt like a woman with something to fight for, and perhaps, just perhaps, someone to fight alongside. Luke left Redemption Creek before dawn, his body still aching from the beating, but his mind sharp with purpose. He'd told Mrs. McAllister he was heading to the hills to hunt, needing fresh game for the boarding house kitchen. It wasn't entirely a lie. He was hunting, just not for deer. The mountain trail wound upward through stands of pine and aspen, the air growing thin and cold. Luke had heard whispers of an old preacher living up here, a hermit who'd abandoned his ministry years ago. If anyone knew the hidden truths of the valley, it would be him. He found the cabin just as the sun crested the peaks. Smoke curling from a stone chimney. An elderly man sat on the porch, whittling, as if he'd been expecting company. Brother Elijah, Luke called out. Just Elijah now, the man replied, not looking up from his work. Left the brother part behind with my congregation. You're the gambling man from town, the one sweet on the heart widow. News travels far up here. Bad news travels everywhere. Elijah finally looked up, revealing eyes still sharp despite his years. What brings you to my mountain, son? The truth about Thomas Hart's death. Elijah's knife stilled. Truth's a dangerous thing in these parts. Why should I trust you with it? Because Evelyn Hart saved my life, Luke said simply. Maybe not from death, but from something worse. From becoming a man I wouldn't recognize. I owe her the same chance. The old preacher studied him for a long moment, then nodded toward a second chair. Sit. I'll tell you what I saw, though it won't make your path any easier. As Luke listened, Elijah painted a picture that made his blood run cold and hot by turns. The preacher had been returning late from visiting a sick parishioner that night 2 years ago. He'd heard screaming from the Hart ranch, had crept close enough to witness Thomas Hart dragging Rosa Mendoza into the barn. I'm ashamed to say I hesitated, Elijah admitted. Wondered if interfering in a man's business with his servants was my place. Then I heard the girl crying, begging, and I knew I had to act. But before I could move, Evelyn appeared. She found them. Like an avenging angel, told Thomas to let the girl go. He laughed, said terrible things about what he planned. When he turned back to Rosa, Elijah's weathered face darkened with memory. Evelyn shot him, clean through the heart. Didn't hesitate, didn't miss. Self-defense. Defense of another, more like, but here's what matters. I saw someone else that night. Someone watching from the shadows who fled when the gun fired. Luke leaned forward. Who? Samuel Price. The name hit Luke like cold water. Price, the saloon owner who'd orchestrated the humiliating poker game. He was there. Thomas owed him significant money. I suspect Price came to collect and instead witnessed something he could use. Elijah resumed his whittling. Why do you think the sheriff's investigation was so quick, so neat? Price had influence, and for some reason, he used it to help Evelyn. But why protect her just to humiliate her later? Control, son. A woman beholden to you is easier to manipulate than one in prison. Price has been playing a long game, and that Geller fellow showing up has disrupted his plans. Luke's mind raced. Pieces falling into place. That's why Price hasn't been openly supporting Geller. He's protecting his investment. Smart boy. Elijah stood, joints creaking. Now, I told you this in confidence. Officially. I saw nothing that night, but if that young woman's life truly hangs in the balance, would you testify? The old man was quiet for a moment, gazing out at the valley below. I abandoned my calling because I lost faith in people's capacity for righteousness. Maybe it's time to see if I was wrong. Luke spent another hour with Elijah, gathering details, understanding angles. By the time he headed back down the mountain, he had more than testimony. He had a strategy. The sun was setting when he reached the outskirts of town. Instead of heading to the boarding house, he made for Price's establishment. The saloon was busy, smoke and noise spilling into the street. Luke pushed through the crowd to Price's private office. I'm busy. Delaney, Price said without looking up from his ledgers. You're going to want to hear this. Luke closed the door behind him. I know you were at the Hart Ranch the night Thomas died. Price's pen stilled. Slowly, he raised his eyes. That's a dangerous accusation. Not an accusation, a fact. Just like it's a fact you helped cover up the truth. The question is why. Get out. Geller's going to destroy her, and when he does, your leverage disappears. Her debt to you won't matter if she's hanged for murder. Price stood abruptly, hand moving toward his desk drawer. Luke raised his hands peacefully. I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here to make a deal. I don't make deals with stable hands. You make deals with anyone who can benefit you. And right now, I'm the only thing standing between you and Royce Geller learning about your involvement that night. Price's eyes narrowed. What do you want? Testify to what you really saw. Clear Evelyn's name. In exchange, her debts to you are cleared, and I don't mention your presence at the scene. You're forgetting something. Delaney, my word against yours? This town knows who to believe. Maybe, But Geller's not from this town. He's got no loyalty to you. What happens when he starts digging into everyone who is connected to Thomas? When he learns about the money Thomas owed you? Luke smiled coldly. Sometimes the best gamble is knowing when to fold. Price was silent for a long moment, calculating. Finally, he sat back down. You've grown a spine since that first night. I found something worth fighting for. The widow. Price's laugh was bitter. You have no idea what you're getting into. Evelyn Hart is the woman I love, Luke said simply. The declaration hung in the air. Price shook his head. Love. In my experience, that's just another word for weakness. In mine, it's another word for strength. We'll see. Price waved dismissively. Get out. I'll consider your proposal. Luke left through the back door, avoiding the main saloon. He needed to check on Evelyn, make sure she was safe, but as he rounded the corner toward her shop, he found his path blocked. Walter Briggs stood there, flanked by two other men. The blacksmith's face was dark with fury. Heard you were back in town, Briggs growled. Thought maybe you'd learned your lesson about interfering where you're not wanted. Apparently not, Luke replied, tensing for violence. She was mine. Briggs snarled. I waited. Was patient, respectful. Then you show up and ruin everything. She was never yours. Briggs. She's not property to be claimed, says the man who won her in a poker game. The words stung because they held truth. Luke had started this journey by winning a degrading wager, but somewhere between that night and now, everything had changed. You're right, Luke admitted. I started wrong, but I'm trying to make it right. Too late for that. The first punch came fast, but Luke was ready. He ducked, counterpunched, sent one attacker sprawling, but 3 against 1, with his body already battered, was poor odds. Soon he was on the ground, protecting his head as boots connected with his ribs. Stop! A woman's voice cut through the violence. Stop this instant! Through swollen eyes, Luke saw Evelyn standing there, derringer in hand, aimed steady at Briggs. This doesn't concern you, Briggs panted. Men beating someone I care about concerns me greatly. Her voice was ice. Leave, now, or I'll show you I'm as good a shot as everyone whispers. You wouldn't dare. The crack of gunfire made everyone freeze. Briggs's hat flew off his head. A neat hole through the crown. The next one goes lower, Evelyn said calmly. The men scattered like roaches in lamplight. Evelyn knelt beside Luke, hands gentle on his face. You fool, she whispered. You beautiful, stubborn fool. Found Elijah. Luke managed through split lips. He'll testify, and Price might help. Shh, save your strength. She helped him stand, supporting his weight. Instead of heading to Doc Morrison's, she guided him to her shop, up the back stairs to her private rooms. Luke was too dazed to protest as she settled him on her small sofa. This is becoming a habit, she murmured, fetching water and bandages. Getting beaten for you? Could think of worse habits. That's not funny. Not trying to be. She cleaned his wounds with practiced efficiency, but her hands trembled slightly. When she was done, she sat back, studying him with an unreadable expression. I heard what you told Price, she said quietly. About loving me. Luke met her gaze steadily. Meant every word. You barely know me. I know enough. Know you're brave and kind and stronger than you believe. Know you make me want to be better than I've been. Know that when I'm with you, I'm home. Tears gathered in her eyes. Luke, you don't have to say anything. Just let me love you. Let me fight for you. That's all I ask. She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't respond. Then, softly, I'm scared. Of Geller. Of this. Of feeling again. Of believing in something good. She touched his face gently. Of losing you like I lose everyone I care about. You won't lose me. You can't promise that. Watch me. He caught her hand, pressed it to his heart. I promise I'll fight for us until my last breath. Promise I'll stand by you through whatever comes. Promise I'll love you even if you never love me back."
"But I do,"
she whispered, the words barely audible.
"God help me, I do."
Then she was kissing him, gentle because of his split lip, but with all the desperate passion of two souls finding harbor in a storm. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "Stay," she said simply. So he did, holding her through the night as she finally let herself break down completely, crying for all she'd lost and all she feared to lose again. And Luke held her, strong despite his wounds, whispering promises he meant to keep. Tomorrow would bring new battles, but tonight they had each other. And for now, that was enough. The courthouse in Redemption Creek had never seen such a crowd. Every bench was filled, people standing along the walls, more gathered outside peering through windows. The air was thick with tobacco smoke and anticipation, like the moments before a thunderstorm breaks. Evelyn sat at the defendant's table, her black dress severe against her pale skin. Luke was beside her, having refused all suggestions that he sit elsewhere. His face still bore bruises from his beatings, but his presence was solid, unwavering. Judge Patterson, a circuit judge from the territorial capital, presided with the weary authority of a man who'd seen too much frontier justice. This hearing will determine whether sufficient evidence exists to overturn the original ruling in the death of Thomas Hart and proceed to a full trial. Royce Geller sat with the prosecutor, his pale snake eyes fixed on Evelyn with undisguised satisfaction. He'd dressed for the occasion in a black suit that made him look like an undertaker come to measure his client. "The territory calls Royce Geller," the prosecutor announced. Geller took the stand with theatrical solemnity. "My cousin Thomas was a good man," he began, his voice carrying to every corner. "Hard-working, God-fearing. His letters to me spoke of difficulties in his marriage, of a wife who refused her duties, who threatened him." Objection. Evelyn's lawyer, young David Hartwell from the next county, stood. Hearsay. Sustained. Mr. Geller, please confine yourself to what you personally witnessed. Geller's smile was thin. "Of course. I visited Thomas 2 months before his death. I saw bruises on his arms, scratches on his face. When I asked about them, he said his wife had attacked him during an argument." A murmur ran through the crowd. Luke felt Evelyn tense beside him. "He feared for his life," Geller continued. "Said she'd threaten to kill him if he ever touched her again. Those were his exact words." "And did Thomas say why his wife might have made such threats?" Hartwell asked on cross-examination. "He was trying to be a proper husband. She resisted his authority." "I see. And these letters you mentioned, do you have them?" "Unfortunately, they were destroyed in a fire at my home in Austin." "How convenient." "Your Honor," the prosecutor protested. "Mr. Hartwell, please refrain from editorial comments." The morning wore on with more witnesses. The town drunk claimed he'd heard Evelyn threaten Thomas at the general store, though he couldn't remember the date or what was said exactly. A traveling salesman swore he'd seen Evelyn purchase ammunition the week before Thomas died, though the store owner's records showed no such purchase. Then Samuel Price took the stand. The saloon owner looked uncomfortable, sweat beading his forehead despite the cool morning. "State your name for the record," the prosecutor instructed. "Samuel Price." "Mr. Price, were you acquainted with Thomas Hart?" "He was a customer, owed me money." "How much?" Price shifted. "Near $300. Gasps from the crowd. That was a fortune to most folks. "And did you attempt to collect this debt?" "I did." "When?" Price's eyes darted to Luke, then away. "The night he died." The courtroom erupted. Judge Patterson hammered for order. "Continue, Mr. Price." "I rode out to the Hart Ranch that evening. Meant to give Thomas one last chance to pay before I took legal action." Price's voice had grown quiet, strained. "When I arrived, I heard commotion from the barn." "What kind of commotion?" "A girl screaming, Mexican girl who worked for them. Thomas had her. He was attempting to force himself on her." The crowd's reaction was immediate and visceral. Women gasped, men muttered. Judge Patterson hammered again. "Order! I'll clear this courtroom." "What happened next?" the prosecutor asked, clearly unhappy with the direction of his witness's testimony. Mrs. Hart appeared. She had Thomas's gun, told him to let the girl go. He laughed, said awful things. When he turned back to the girl, Mrs. Hart shot him. "So you're saying it was murder?" "I'm saying it was the most justified killing I ever witnessed." Price's voice grew stronger. "That girl was 15 years old. Thomas Hart was an animal who got what he deserved." The prosecutor tried to salvage something from his witness, but Price had made his choice. When he stepped down, he walked past Luke and nodded once, slightly. "The defense calls Rosa Mendoza de Silva." Rosa entered through the side door, head high despite the weight of every eye upon her. She wore a simple but clean dress, her hair neatly pinned. Her husband followed, sitting in the front row as a show of support. "Please state your name." "Rosa Mendoza de Silva." "Mrs. Silva, please tell the court about the night of Thomas Hart's death." Rosa's voice started soft but grew stronger as she spoke. She told of Thomas's increasing aggression, his inappropriate advances, how she'd tried to avoid him, but that night he'd cornered her in the barn when she went to check on a sick calf. "He grabbed me, said I belonged to him like everything else on his property. I screamed, fought, but he was too strong." Tears ran down her face, but she didn't stop. "He tore my dress, pushed me down. I thought I would die." "Then what happened?" Mrs. Hart appeared like an angel. She had a gun, told him to stop. He laughed, said terrible things about her, about me. He turned back, reached for me again, and she fired. "Mrs. Hart saved your life." "Yes, and then she told me to run, to leave town for my safety. She gave me money from her hidden savings, helped me escape. She saved me twice that night." Geller's attorney tried to shake her testimony on cross-examination, suggesting she'd been paid to lie, that she'd encouraged Thomas's advances. But Rosa held firm, her dignity unshakable. "I gain nothing from being here except shame," she said quietly. "People will whisper about me now, wonder what I did to encourage him. But I couldn't let Mrs. Hart suffer for protecting me. She's a hero, not a murderer." The defense's final witness was unexpected. The defense calls Elijah Morrison. The former preacher entered slowly, leaning on a cane. Despite his hermit reputation, he commanded respect. His testimony corroborated every detail of Price's and Rosa's accounts. "I saw everything from outside the barn," he stated. "I was coming to intervene when Mrs. Hart arrived. She showed more courage than I did that night, more righteousness." "But surely killing is a sin?" Geller's attorney pressed. "So is standing by while innocence is destroyed." Elijah replied, "If there was sin that night, it belonged to Thomas Hart alone." When the testimony concluded, Judge Patterson called for a recess. In the small room set aside for the defense, Evelyn finally allowed herself to breathe. "It's going well," Hartwell said encouragingly. Their witnesses established clear justification, but Luke noticed Geller's satisfied expression and felt uneasy. The man had one more card to play. Court reconvened for closing arguments. The prosecutor went first, painting Evelyn as a calculating woman who'd married for money and killed when her husband became inconvenient. But his heart wasn't in it. The testimony had clearly shaken him. Hartwell's closing was passionate, focusing on Evelyn's heroism in protecting Rosa. He painted Thomas Hart as the monster he was, Evelyn as the reluctant hero forced to act. "But there's one more matter." Geller stood, interrupting protocol. "Your Honor, I have evidence that wasn't available earlier." "Mr. Geller, you're out of order." "A witness just arrived from Austin. Someone who can speak to Evelyn Hart's true character." Judge Patterson frowned but was curious. "Very well, but this better be relevant. The territory recalls Evelyn Hart. But first, we call Margaret Donnelly." Evelyn went white. Luke had never seen her look so stricken. A woman entered, middle-aged, wearing traveling clothes. She looked at Evelyn with a mixture of pity and determination. State your relationship to the defendant. I was her stepmother in Virginia before she ran away. The courtroom buzzed. This was unexpected. Mrs. Donnelly, why did Evelyn leave home? The woman hesitated, then squared her shoulders. There was an incident with her father, my husband. What kind of incident? She killed him. The explosion of noise was deafening. Evelyn swayed, and Luke steadied her, his mind reeling. When order was restored, Margaret Donnelly continued. He was interfering with her, had been since her mother died. One night, she fought back, hit him with a poker from the fireplace. He died. So she's killed before, Geller said triumphantly. A pattern of violence. To protect herself. Margaret's voice rose.
Just like with Thomas Hart.
I helped her run because I knew what my husband was. I failed to protect her in life, but I won't fail her now. She turned to Evelyn. I'm sorry, child. For everything. You did what you had to do, both times. That's not murder, that's survival. The courtroom was in chaos. Judge Patterson hammered repeatedly for order. When quiet finally fell, he looked exhausted. Mrs. Hart, please take the stand. Evelyn moved like a sleepwalker. Under gentle questioning from Hartwell, the whole truth emerged. Her father's abuse, the night she'd fought back, her flight west, her hope for a new life with Thomas, only to find another monster behind a charming mask. I've killed 2 men, she said, voice steady despite her tears. And I would do it again to protect myself or another woman from such evil. If that makes me a murderer in the eyes of the law, so be it. But I will not apologize for surviving. When she stepped down, she walked past Luke, touched his hand briefly. He saw in her eyes not defeat, but a strange peace. The truth, all of it, was finally in the light. Judge Patterson retired to consider his decision. The wait was agony. When he returned, his expression was grave. This case has revealed truths that disturb the conscience. The evidence shows that in both instances, Mrs. Hart acted in defense of herself and of another. The law recognizes the right of self-defense in defense of others. He looked directly at Evelyn. Mrs. Hart, this court finds no grounds to overturn the original ruling. The death of Thomas Hart was justifiable homicide. You are free to go. The courtroom erupted. Some cheered, others protested. Geller shot to his feet, face purple with rage. This is not over. But it was. Sheriff Watson was already moving to escort Geller out. The crowd began to disperse, everyone talking at once. In the chaos, Luke found Evelyn standing alone, looking lost. He went to her, pulled her into his arms. It's over, he whispered. All of it's out now. Everyone knows what I am. A survivor, a protector, the bravest woman I know. She looked up at him, wonder in her eyes. You still? More than ever. Around them, the crowd swirled, but they stood in their own quiet space, holding each other. The truth hadn't destroyed her. Instead, it had set her free. The weeks following the trial were strange ones for Evelyn. She moved through town like a ghost made suddenly visible, no longer hidden behind whispered rumors but exposed in full light. Some women crossed the street to avoid her. Others, surprising her, offered quiet nods of understanding, even respect. Luke had returned to his work at the livery stable, but something had shifted between them. The crisis that had drawn them together was past, leaving them to navigate what came next without the urgency of danger to guide them. One evening, Evelyn was closing the shop when Mrs. Theodore Barnes entered. The banker's wife was known for setting the social tone in Redemption Creek, and her presence could mean acceptance or final condemnation. Mrs. Barnes. Evelyn greeted her cautiously. Mrs. Hart, I need a dress altered. The older woman studied her with sharp eyes. I also wanted to say that what you did took courage, both times. Evelyn's hands stilled on the fabric she'd been folding. Thank you. My sister in Chicago went through something similar with her first husband. She wasn't as strong as you. She didn't survive it. Mrs. Barnes cleared her throat. You'll alter this dress, and you'll do it well, and I'll wear it to the church social next week. Let them gossip about that. After she left, Evelyn sat in the gathering dusk, overwhelmed. Luke found her there an hour later, still sitting in the dark. No lights? He asked gently. I was thinking. He lit a lamp, studied her face. About who I am now. For so long I was Thomas's victim, then Thomas's killer, then the woman with the terrible secret. Now everyone knows everything, and I don't know how to be. Luke pulled up a chair beside her. Maybe that's the gift. You get to decide who to be. It's terrifying. Most freedom is... They sat quietly for a moment before Evelyn spoke again. Luke, what are we doing? What do you mean? This, us. You stood by me through the trial, but now, you don't owe me anything anymore. Is that what you think, that I stayed out of obligation? Didn't you? Luke was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, my father was a good man, taught me about honor, duty, protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. When he died in the war, I tried to live by his code, but somewhere along the way, I lost myself, became a drifter, a gambler, a man without purpose. He turned to face her fully. Then I met you. And yes, at first it was about protection, about doing the right thing. But Evelyn, somewhere between that first night and now, you became my purpose, not protecting you, just you. Luke, I love you. Not because you need saving, not because you're broken, not because of your past. I love the woman who gets up every morning and faces a hostile town, who creates beautiful things with her hands, who laughs at my terrible jokes and makes the best coffee I've ever tasted. My coffee is awful, she protested weakly. See, I'm so far gone I can't even taste straight. Despite everything, she laughed. Then she was crying and laughing at once, and Luke was holding her, and she felt something she'd never expected to feel again, safe. I don't know how to be in love, she whispered against his chest. I don't know how to trust it. We'll learn together. What if I'm too damaged? What if I can't? He pulled back, cupped her face in his hands. Then we'll work with what we have. No expectations, no demands, just us, figuring it out as we go. You make it sound simple. Simple doesn't mean easy, but I'm not going anywhere. Evelyn, not unless you tell me to. She kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they parted, she felt something settle in her chest, a decision made. Stay, she said. So he did. The town's reaction to their openly acknowledged courtship was mixed. Some saw it as scandalous, the widow taking up with her defender before a proper mourning period. Others, particularly the younger couples and those who'd lived through their own hardships, saw it as romantic. Luke moved his few possessions from the boarding house to the small apartment above Evelyn's shop. They were careful, respectful of appearances in public. But in private, they built a quiet domestic life that surprised them both with its sweetness. Luke learned that Evelyn hummed while she cooked, that she liked her bath water scalding hot, that she read penny novels in bed and cried at the happy endings. Evelyn discovered that Luke was meticulous about caring for his boots, that he could play the harmonica beautifully, that nightmares sometimes woke him gasping for air, memories of the war he rarely discussed. One night, as rain pelted the windows and they lay entwined in bed, Evelyn traced the scars on his chest. We're quite a pair, aren't we? All our wounds and ghosts. Matched set. He agreed, catching her hand and kissing her palm. Do you ever wonder if we're too broken? If two damaged people can make something whole? Every day. Then I wake up next to you and figure we're doing something right. She was quiet for a moment. I never thanked you properly. For everything you risked for me. You don't need to. I do. She propped herself on an elbow, looking down at him in the lamplight. You gave me back my life, Luke, not just by standing by me through the trial, but by seeing me as more than my past, by making me believe I deserved a future. You always deserved that. But I didn't believe it. Until you. They made love then, slow and tender, a conversation without words. After, as Evelyn drowsed against his chest, Luke stared at the ceiling and made plans. He'd been saving his wages, had enough now for what he wanted to do. Tomorrow, he decided, tomorrow he'd ask. But tomorrow brought unexpected visitors. Luke was at the stable when young Timothy Watson came running. "Mr. Delaney, Pa says come quick. There's trouble at the shop." Luke ran, fear cold in his gut. He found a crowd gathered outside Evelyn's shop, Sheriff Watson holding them back. Through the broken window, Luke could see Evelyn standing amid destruction, fabric bolts thrown about, her sewing machine smashed, dress forms toppled and torn. "What happened?" "Vandalism," Watson said grimly. "Happened while she was at the general store. No one saw anything, of course." Luke pushed through to Evelyn. She stood perfectly still, surveying the wreckage of her livelihood with dry eyes. "It's Geller," she said quietly. "Or his men, a parting gift." "We don't know that," Watson protested. "Who else?" Luke demanded. "He swore this wasn't over. Without proof." Watson spread his hands helplessly. Luke wanted to rage, to hunt Geller down and finish what the man had started, but Evelyn's hand on his arm stopped him. "No," she said firmly. "No more violence on my account. I've had enough of it for a lifetime. But your shop can be rebuilt, cleaned, fixed." She turned to face the crowd. Chin high. "I've survived worse than a tantrum from a bitter man. This doesn't break me." Murmurs rippled through the gathered townsfolk. Then Margaret O'Brien stepped forward. "I've got spare fabric at home. Good wool." "I can help clean," added young Mrs. Fisher. "My husband's handy with machines," another woman offered. "He could look at your sewing machine." One by one, people stepped forward. Not everyone. Some still hung back, judgment in their eyes, but enough. More than enough. By evening, the shop was transformed. Women who'd barely acknowledged Evelyn before worked side by side with her, sweeping glass, sorting salvageable fabric, sharing quiet stories of their own struggles. Men repaired what they could, boarded the broken window, reinforced the door. Luke watched Evelyn move among them, saw her surprise give way to cautious hope, then genuine warmth. This was what she'd needed more than protection, more than vindication. Community. Acceptance. As the sun set and the helpers departed, Evelyn and Luke stood in the restored shop. It wasn't perfect. The sewing machine would need parts ordered. Some fabric was beyond saving, but it was whole again. "I can't believe they came," Evelyn said softly. "You showed them what courage looks like. Some folks just need time to catch up." She leaned against him. "What did I do to deserve you?" "Got lucky in a poker game?" She laughed, the sound bright in the dim shop. "Best bet you ever made." "Without question." He pulled something from his pocket. Speaking of bets, Evelyn gasped at the simple gold ring in his palm. "Luke, it's not fancy, but it's real, and it's yours if you'll have it. If you'll have me. You're proposing, here, now, after everything today? Can't think of a better time. You showed everyone today who you really are, strong, resilient, worth fighting for. I want to spend my life proving I'm worthy of you. You already have." She held out her hand. "Let him slip the ring on." Yes, Luke Delaney. Yes to all of it. He kissed her as the last light faded from the windows. There in her rebuilt shop, surrounded by evidence of community and grace. Outside, Redemption Creek went about its evening business, unaware that two broken souls had just promised to forge something whole from their pieces. "I love you," Evelyn whispered against his lips. "And I love you," he replied. "Ghosts, scars, and all." "Think we can make it work? A former gambler and a woman with my history? I'd bet on us any day." And for the first time in years, Evelyn Hart believed in the future, their future, together. Winter came early to Redemption Creek that year, the first snow falling just 2 weeks after Luke's proposal. He stood on the porch of their shop, now bearing a new sign that read, "The Second Thread, Fine Tailoring and Dry Goods," watching Evelyn arrange bolts of warm wool in the window display. "Need help?" he called.
I've got it.
she replied, then laughed as a bolt tumbled from her arms. Perhaps I don't. They'd been married a month now, wed in a simple ceremony at the church with Mrs. McAllister and Sheriff Watson as witnesses. Reverend Garvey had performed the service with obvious reluctance, but even he couldn't deny the change in the town's attitude toward Evelyn. The trial had transformed her from pariah to something like a folk hero, a woman who'd survived the worst and emerged stronger. Luke helped her finish the display, then pulled her close. Happy? More than I ever thought possible. She traced the collar of his new shirt, one she'd made him as a wedding gift. Though I do wonder sometimes. What? If it's real, if I'll wake up and find it's all been a dream. Want me to pinch you? She swatted his arm playfully. I'm serious. Sometimes happiness feels more frightening than sorrow. There's more to lose. Luke understood. He felt it too sometimes. The fear that their hard-won peace might shatter. But he'd learned something in their months together, that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but moving forward despite it. Then we'll be frightened together, he said, and happy together. And whatever else comes, we'll face it. Together, she finished, standing on tiptoes to kiss him. The bell above the door chimed, and they sprang apart like guilty children. Rosa Mendoza de Silva entered, carrying a wrapped package. Rosa? Evelyn embraced her friend warmly. After the trial, Rosa and her husband had decided to stay in the area, opening a small restaurant in Cedar Ridge. She visited monthly, and each time, Evelyn seemed lighter for days after. I brought you something, Rosa said, handing over the package. For the house. Inside was a beautiful embroidered tablecloth, worked with a pattern of intertwining roses and threads. Rosa, it's gorgeous. Every home needs beautiful things, Rosa said simply. Things made with love, not bought with fear. The women spent the afternoon talking while Luke worked on the shop's books. They'd expanded beyond tailoring, adding fabric sales and notions, even some ready-made clothing ordered from Denver. The business was thriving, and Luke had discovered an unexpected talent for numbers and negotiation. As Rosa prepared to leave, she paused at the door. I heard Royce Geller left Texas. Some trouble with the law there. Seems he was forging documents to steal land from other widows, too. Good riddance, Luke muttered. The past is the past. Evelyn said firmly, let it stay buried. But the past, as they'd learned, didn't always cooperate with wishes. That evening, as they prepared dinner in their small apartment, Luke noticed a letter that had arrived with the afternoon post. The return address made his blood run cold. Austin, Texas. Evelyn, he said carefully. There's a letter. From Texas. She froze, then slowly turned. Geller? I don't think so. Different handwriting. With trembling hands. She opened it. As she read, her face went through a series of expressions. Shock, disbelief, then something like wonder. It's from a lawyer, she said faintly. Thomas's family estate in Texas. His father died last month, and apparently... She sat down hard. Apparently, the old man never wrote Thomas out of the will after all. As Thomas's widow, I inherit his portion, $5,000. Luke whistled low. It was a fortune, enough to transform their comfortable life into something truly prosperous. There must be conditions, Evelyn said, scanning the letter again. Some catch. Maybe not. Maybe it's just life balancing the scales a little. She looked up at him, tears in her eyes. What do we do with it? Whatever you want. It's your inheritance. Ours. She corrected firmly. Everything is ours now. They talked late into the night, making plans, expanding the shop, perhaps buying the building outright, setting aside funds for the children they hoped to have, and something else, something that mattered to Evelyn deeply. I want to help other women, she said. Women in situations like mine was Rosa's, a fund to help them escape, start over. The Evelyn Delaney Fund for New Beginnings, Luke suggested. $2,000, just help quietly, the way people helped me. The next morning brought another surprise. Walter Briggs appeared at the shop. hat literally in hand, face red with embarrassment. "I owe you an apology," he said gruffly. "Both of you. I behaved badly. Let jealousy and pride override decency." Luke tensed, but Evelyn stepped forward graciously. "We all make mistakes. Mr. Briggs, thank you for the apology." "I'm leaving town," Briggs continued. "Got an offer from a mine in Colorado, better opportunities, but I wanted to make things right first." He pulled out a small, wrapped box. "Wedding gift. Made it myself." Inside were 2 beautifully crafted iron bookends, shaped like horses. "They're wonderful," Evelyn said sincerely. "Thank you." After he left, Luke shook his head. "This town continues to surprise me." "People are complicated," Evelyn mused. "Capable of cruelty and kindness, often in the same heart." Speaking from experience. We all are, aren't we? None of us purely good or evil, just human, trying to do better than we did yesterday. That afternoon, they walked to the cemetery at the edge of town. Evelyn carried flowers, not for Thomas's grave, which she'd never visited, but for a small marker they'd had placed for her mother, somewhere to focus memory and grief. "I forgive him," she said suddenly. "Who? Thomas?" "My father, Thomas, all of them." She knelt, arranging the flowers carefully. "Not for their sake. For mine. I'm tired of carrying their sins along with my own." Luke helped her stand, saw the peace in her face. This was what healing looked like. Not forgetting, not excusing, but releasing the poison of old wounds. As they walked home, snow began to fall again. Fat flakes that caught in Evelyn's dark hair like stars. Main Street was busy with Christmas preparation, shop windows bright with decorations. Several people called out greetings, and Evelyn responded warmly to each. "You've become quite the social butterfly," Luke teased. "Hardly, but it's nice, being part of something, belonging." They paused outside their shop, admiring their window display. A wedding dress Evelyn had created, beautiful in its simplicity, with a card that read, "New beginnings welcome here." "No regrets?" Luke asked, as he did sometimes, still hardly believing she'd chosen him. "Only one," Evelyn said, turning in his arms. "That it took so long to find you." "Worth the wait. Worth everything." As they stood there in the falling snow, Luke thought about the strange path that had brought them together. A desperate gamble, a degrading wager, violence and trials and the exposure of painful truths. Yet from all that darkness had come this: love, partnership, a future neither had dared imagine. "What are you thinking?" Evelyn asked, studying his face. "About that first night, the poker game. If I'd lost..." "But you didn't." She reached up to touch his face. "You played the hand you were dealt and won everything that mattered." "We both did." The shop door opened. Setting the bell chiming, Mrs. O'Brien emerged with a package. "Oh, good. You're here. Evelyn, dear, that dress is perfect. My daughter will be the most beautiful Christmas bride. You're a true artist." After she left, they entered their shop, their home, their sanctuary built from the ashes of old pain. Luke stoked the stove while Evelyn made coffee. Still terrible, but he'd never tell her so. "I've been thinking," Evelyn said, handing him a cup, "about expanding our inventory. Maybe some items from back east. Books, perhaps. Educational materials. For the school. For anyone who wants to learn. Reading saved my life once. Gave me escape when I had no other. I'd like to pass that on." Luke pulled her close. "Have I told you today that I love you?" "Only 3 times. You're slipping. Can't have that? I love you. Evelyn Delaney, I love your courage and your kindness and your terrible coffee. I love the way you hum when you're happy and the way you scrunch your nose when you're concentrating. I love..." She silenced him with a kiss, long and sweet and full of promise. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing Redemption Creek in pristine white, but inside, the second thread. All was warmth and light and love, a testament to the power of second chances and the courage to seize them. As night fell and they climbed the stairs to their apartment, Evelyn paused at the window. In the distance, She could see the red rocks that gave the valley its color, now softened by snow. The same rocks that had witnessed her arrival as a frightened bride, her years of suffering, her moment of desperate violence, and her eventual redemption. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Luke wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Yes," he agreed, but he wasn't looking at the view. They stood there together, two souls who'd found harbor in each other, watching the sun set on another day in their hard-won happiness. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Life in the frontier always did. But tonight, they were home. And that, Luke thought as he led his wife to their bed, was the biggest gamble that had paid off. Not the poker game that brought them together, but the daily choice to trust, to hope, to love despite all the reasons not to. As Evelyn had stitched on a sampler that now hung in their shop. From broken threads, the strongest fabric is woven. Their story was proof of that truth, woven from pain and courage, loss and redemption, chance and choice, a gambler and a widow. Unlikely threads that together created something beautiful, enduring and whole. In the morning, they would rise and face whatever came. But for now, they held each other close, two hearts beating as one, grateful for the crooked path that had led them home. Thank you so much for listening to this tale of love and redemption in the Old West. I hope Luke and Evelyn's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine in the telling. Where are you listening from tonight? Drop a comment below and let's connect across the miles, just like the frontier folks did around their campfires. Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more stories of courage, romance, and adventure from America's untamed past. Share your thoughts about Luke and Evelyn's story. Did you see that twist coming? What was your favorite moment? Until we meet again around the campfire, partners, keep your hearts brave and your spirits true. Happy trails.